My name is Sloane Mercer. I'm 32 years old. I was born in rural Idaho, but today I'm standing in a VFW hall just outside San Antonio, Texas. I shouldn't have come, but he asked. And it's hard to say no when it's your brother's big day. The folding chairs screech every time someone shifts. Beneath the fluorescent lights, everything looks faded, except him, my brother Logan, who stands front and center shaking hands like a senator. He's being celebrated for re-upping into active duty. Again, they gave him a podium, a flag backdrop, a mic with way too much feedback. He makes a joke about deployments and dating. The room laughs. Then he gestures toward me. That's my sister Sloane back there, 5 black belts, and still couldn't fight off a cold last Thanksgiving. Pause. Laughter. Someone slaps his back. Joke's on her, I actually do something that matters. I don't say a word. I don't even blink. My hands rest calmly on the back of a chair. My nails are short. My spine is straight. Mom's laughing too. She dabs her eyes like it's the sweetest thing he's ever said. No one looks my way, except one man off to the left behind the flag wall. Uniform pressed. Tabs I recognize. His eyes narrow when he sees me. He doesn't laugh. And then the mic cuts out with a loud pop. The room falls still for half a breath. I stay frozen, because this moment right here, this is the part where everything quietly shifts. The silence doesn't last long. Someone makes a joke about tech issues, and the room exhales again. Logan starts improvising without the mic raising his voice a little. He's good at holding a crowd. Always was. Even when he was a kid breaking windows and blaming it on me. I move to the refreshment table and pour myself some lukewarm coffee. No sugar, no cream, just something to hold. I sip. I watch, and I listen to my brother rewrite history for applause. You know when I enlisted nobody thought I'd make it past basic, he says, grinning. Except Sloane. She always believed I'd be something. Another laugh. A few heads glance back toward me. Not out of kindness, just confirmation. Like, is she really here? I nod politely. I don't feel anything. Not yet. My niece tugs at my sleeve, Kayla, age 10, her hair in 2 crooked braids. Why did Uncle Logan say you have 5 black belts? She whispers. Do you fight people? I crouch beside her. Not unless they start it, I say softly. She giggles and leans against me like I'm a shield. There's a small stage, set up metal risers scuffed from use. They call Logan up again to receive a plaque. The battalion XO shakes his hand. Then the commanding officer, a lieutenant colonel, steps forward. And behind him, someone new, not in dress blues, not here for show. The man who didn't laugh earlier. His uniform's clean, but worn. No rank insignia I can see clearly. But the posture, the presence, unmistakable. He's command. The plaque is handed off. Photos are taken. A few more handshakes. And then something shifts. That man, the one watching, steps forward. He doesn't say much, just leans into the lieutenant colonel and whispers something. The colonel stiffens, turns to Logan and nods curtly. Then the man approaches me. Conversations hush again like a ripple in a quiet lake. He stops in front of me, eyes steady, voice low only for me, but somehow loud enough to carry. Ma'am, permission to speak freely. My brother turns mid-laugh, freezes. I nod once. He nods back sharply like a soldier reporting in. And then he turns not to Logan, not to the crowd, but to the podium. Respect is earned, not handed out like trophies. And when you speak of skill, you speak her name with it. He doesn't shout, but the words hit hard, like a sudden drop in pressure before a storm. People start whispering. One guy in the back stands straighter. An older woman lowers her phone mid-photo. Logan's smile is gone. He stares like someone rewound the whole room and started over. I don't move. Don't smile. Don't say I told you so. That's not how this works. That's never how it worked. When the moment ends, it doesn't crash. It fades. Someone coughs. A chair squeaks. The spell breaks, but the air doesn't quite go back to normal. Because now they all know something just happened. They just don't know what. Kayla slides her small hand into mine. Why did that man call you ma'am? She asks. I squeeze her hand gently, because he knows what 5 black belts mean. She doesn't understand. Not yet. but one day she will. That's how Section 1 closes, with quiet tension hanging in the air, the emotional weight pressing in, and a deep promise that there's much more under the surface. I wasn't supposed to be the quiet one. When we were kids, Logan was the shy one hiding behind my backpack, begging me to speak for him. Funny how time reshapes memory. Now, I'm the ghost in the room. He's the story everyone retells. We grew up in Twin Falls, Idaho, in a house with a half-finished porch and a cracked basketball hoop. Dad worked maintenance at the county building. Mom taught Sunday school and made tater-tot casserole like it was a sacred rite. Logan played baseball. I watched. He got trophies. I got books. It started small the way it always does. She's just going through a phase. Let her do her karate thing. She'll grow out of it. I didn't. By 13, I had 2 black belts. By 16, 5. They didn't come from strip mall dojos either. I traveled. I trained. I bled for them. While Logan went to homecoming and barely scraped through junior year, I was sparring with men twice my size. Quietly. Consistently. But at home, none of that counted. It's not a real sport, Dad said once. It's like learning to play dead. Looks good won't help you when it matters. I wanted to ask help who. But I didn't. I just cleaned my GI, rolled up my knuckles, and showed up again the next day. At 19, I left for Arizona with 1 duffel bag and an invite. A quiet academy part, tactical part private security, mostly whispers. I never told them what it really was. They didn't ask. To them, it was just Sloane's ninja camp. Mom told people I was wasting my 20s. Dad said I should have joined the real military like a patriot. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Years passed. I sent postcards, sometimes a birthday gift for Kayla, but I stopped trying to explain my world to theirs. It didn't matter how many doors I broke through, how many contracts I led, how many languages I learned to read in threat reports. Logan's the one doing something real, Dad said last year. He's wearing the uniform. So am I wanted to say, but not the kind they understand. He joined the Army late after 2 DUIs and a failed startup. Mom still hung his enlistment photo in the living room like a medal. When I earned my 5th black belt and became a certified hand-to-hand systems trainer for a specialized branch, nothing. Not even a call. They never meant to hurt me. That's the part that stings most. They truly believed Logan was doing something noble while I was somewhere in the desert learning kung fu. The problem wasn't just ignorance. It was pride misplaced, immovable, generational pride. But I kept showing up when it mattered. When Mom was in the hospital after her surgery, I was the one who stayed overnight. When Logan missed Kayla's recital, I sent the flowers. When Dad got audited, I fixed it before he even knew the letter had arrived. You always were the practical one, he said once, and yet never the respected one. I didn't resent them. Not really. Resentment is heavy. It corrodes. I just let the distance grow like moss on a quiet stone. The only person who ever asked the right questions was Kayla. Why don't you wear a uniform? Can you really throw someone bigger than Uncle Logan? What's that mark on your arm? She saw things, details others ignored. So one night I let her watch me train. Just once. No cameras, no talking, just movement sweat focus. Afterward, she didn't speak for almost a full minute. Then she whispered, "I think you're stronger than anyone knows." That was the first time I let myself believe it, too. Still, I kept my silence. I let Logan have the spotlight. Let Mom believe the medals were the measure. Let Dad shake his head every time I refused to explain what it is I really do. I let the world underestimate me. It was quieter that way. But quiet isn't weak. Quiet isn't passive. Sometimes it's a decision. And mine was simple. I don't need them to understand. I just need them to see. Even if it takes a lifetime. It wasn't one moment. It was a series of small cuts. Words they didn't think twice about. Choices that erased me over and over again. It started with a photo. Logan posted a picture from his unit's field exercise. He tagged the whole family, even Aunt May, who doesn't know how to use her email. But not me. I clicked on the comments anyway. I shouldn't have. There were hearts, salutes. "Proud of you, soldier." And then a message from Mom. This one makes my heart full. "You're the true protector in this family." I blinked. No mention of the niece I kept safe. No mention of the late-night calls I answered when she was panicking about Logan not coming home. No mention of the quiet job I couldn't talk about but that kept people like him alive. At Thanksgiving, it got worse. We sat around the folding table in the church basement. Logan brought his squad mate someone loud, sunburned, already half drunk by noon. Mom made introductions like she was presenting royalty. This is Logan's buddy from Fort Drum. Oh, and that's Sloane. She does, tactical stuff. She teaches kids karate or something. The guy looked me over once. Bet you're fast. Still wouldn't take you in a fight. Logan laughed. Not unless you're allergic to humility. She's got 5 black belts and certificates. They all laughed. I didn't. I just looked down at my plate and reminded myself to chew slowly. Quiet mouth, straight back, steady hand. Later that night, I offered to do the dishes. Just needed a reason to be alone with the sound of water and steel. Dad came in, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You ever think about doing something real with your life? I stopped scrubbing. But I didn't look at him. Real, I asked, finally. Yeah. Like Logan, serving your country, putting on the uniform, not just kicking bags and calling it work. I rinsed a plate, stacked it to dry. Didn't reply. Because what do you say to a man who thinks a rank on your shoulder is the only way to prove worth? What do you say when your job can't be explained on Facebook? A week later, I found out Mom had told people at church that I was unemployed, that I was still trying to figure out what she wants to be. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but then I saw it in her handwriting, a prayer request list on the fridge for Sloane, that she finds her path. I'd already led over 200 classified training missions by then. But sure, still finding my path. They didn't just doubt me, they deleted me. I stopped being someone real in their eyes. Just a placeholder, an afterthought, a shadow. Then came the promotion. It wasn't one I could post about, the kind that comes with codes, not ribbons, the kind where your name isn't on the door, it's on a list behind 6 locked doors. But it meant something, and I wanted foolishly for someone in my family to be proud. So I called Logan. I told him in vague terms that I'd been moved to lead a multinational team for advanced tactical integration. He laughed. That sounds like code for running drills with foam swords in a garage. I waited. Maybe he'd walk it back. He didn't. Anyway, he said, "Can you Venmo Mom? She needs help with the heater bill. I already sent something. I wired the money." Said nothing, hung up, sat in the dark. That night, I took out my belts. All 5 of them. Lined them across the floor like a quiet timeline of who I used to be, each one earned with blood, sweat, cracked ribs, and torn ligaments. Not one of them mattered now, not to the people who shared my blood. They didn't steal my career, they didn't take my skills, but they took something deeper, the right to be seen, the right to be respected in the space I earned. They built a narrative around me and left no room for truth. The worst part, I let them. For years, I thought staying quiet was the high road. That dignity meant silence, but silence can also mean surrender. And somewhere along the line, I stopped correcting them, stopped offering more, let them laugh. By the time Logan's re-enlistment ceremony came around, I wasn't just hurt, I was erased. But I went anyway, because sometimes even ghosts show up to haunt the living, and sometimes ghosts remember who they were, and decide to return with a pulse. There was a night not long after Thanksgiving when I sat in my apartment in silence. No music, no TV. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the hollow tick of the clock on the wall. 9:43 p.m. Too early for sleep. Too late to start something new. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom holding a duffel bag. Packed, half-zipped. Out of habit, not intention. I didn't know where I was going, or if I'd actually leave. But for the first time in years, I thought about disappearing. Just not being this version of me anymore. I had given everything to this life, trained in silence, led quietly, served without ceremony, and still the people who were supposed to know me best thought I was a joke, a little sister, a quirky martial artist, a placeholder until Logan said something worth clapping for. I walked to the mirror, looked myself straight in the eyes. The woman staring back didn't flinch, but she looked tired. Not physically. Tired in her bones. The kind of fatigue that comes from years of being invisible. I remembered the ceremony. The moment Logan made that joke, loud grinning like he was proud of humiliating me. 5 black belts and still couldn't fight off a cold. I didn't cry then. I didn't flinch. But now, alone, it replayed in my head on a loop, and it started to feel like the truth. Maybe I was ridiculous. Maybe all my training, my discipline, my obsession with control, none of it mattered. Maybe the world only respected medals you could pin to your chest. Maybe I'd built my whole life on something no one ever asked for. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, knees pulled close. I thought about the last time someone told me I'm proud of you. It wasn't family. It wasn't a partner. It was a commanding officer, one I respected deeply, who whispered it after I'd disarmed a hostage situation without firing a single shot. You did it clean. That's rare. I'm proud of that. But I never wrote home about it, because there's no box to check for that kind of win. I thought about quitting. Not just the work, the whole identity. Turning in my clearances, walking away from the contracts, letting my belts gather dust in a storage unit. Maybe I'd move to Oregon, start a bookstore, live quietly, let go. What had I proven anyway? I trained harder than anyone I knew, studied longer, fought smarter. But I couldn't win a single inch of ground in the one place I wanted it most, my family's respect. The phone buzzed once, a message from Kayla. You still up? I found your belt in my closet. Can I keep it just for me? She added a photo, her holding my third-degree belt like a scarf. Her smile wide, toothy, full of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Belief. She still believed. I stared at the screen, felt the air shift, just slightly. The voices in my head quieted, not gone, but silenced for now. Because even if Logan never saw me, even if Mom never understood me, even if Dad never said it, Kayla did. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to get up. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at her little face on the screen, and I whispered, Yeah, kid, you can keep it, because one day someone's going to try to tell you who you are, and you'll need something in your hand to remind you what's real. The next morning, I woke early. Not because I wanted to, but because my body's been trained for years to respond to darkness like a signal. In the quiet stillness before dawn, I sat on my floor and stretched. Not for a mission, not for a fight, just to remember that I could move, that I was still here. The ache in my muscles told me something important. I hadn't disappeared. Even if they didn't see me, I still existed. I still mattered. Somewhere beneath the numbness, I felt the slow thrum of something familiar. Discipline. That quiet old friend. The one that doesn't cheer, doesn't praise, but never leaves. I rolled up my belts one by one. Black fabric frayed edges worn soft with years of impact. Each one tied a different version of me together. The girl who was laughed at in gym class, the young woman who sparred in basements, the instructor who trained covert teams in a warehouse with no windows. Not a single one of those belts came easy. And suddenly I knew they didn't have to believe in me, because I never earned these for them. I stood up and walked to the mirror again. Same reflection, still tired, but this time something in my shoulders had changed. Not lifted, not lightened, just set, like I'd made a decision. I texted Kayla back, You can keep the belt, but only if you promise one thing. She replied instantly, What? Don't ever let anyone tell you what your strength looks like, especially if they laugh. There was no response after that, but she saw it. I know she did. I spent the rest of the morning alone. Didn't talk, didn't check social, didn't reach out. I just let the silence speak. Let the shame burn itself out. It was strange how peaceful it felt once I stopped trying to prove anything. They had taken my presence at the table, dismissed my work, laughed at my path, and for a moment I let them. But that moment was over now. They didn't need to believe in me, because belief, I realized, is something I had been outsourcing for far too long, to Dad's approval, to Logan's spotlight, to Mom's quiet favoritism. That wasn't their fault. It was mine. I let them define my worth. Until now. I got dressed. Black compression shirt, dark jeans. The same boots I'd worn on my first op, still solid, still quiet. There would be another ceremony next week. A chance to return, not for them, But for me, not to gloat, not to flex, just to remind myself who I was. A ghost, yes, but a ghost that could walk through walls. By noon, the sun broke through the window and lit up the living room floor. The light didn't feel warm exactly, but it felt like forward. 3 days later, I stood outside the armory compound near the edge of the base. No fanfare, no cameras, just the cold metal door coated silent. I slid my clearance badge across the panel. Green. The lock hissed open. Inside, the lights flickered to life. Everything was exactly as I left it. Matte floors. Combat dummies lined against the walls. Training weapons hung like instruments in a quiet orchestra. I stepped to the center of the room, paused, then dropped into a stance. The first strike was slow, measured. I could feel where my body had tightened during the weeks I'd let doubt in, but on the fifth form, I was flowing. My hands moved without hesitation, my breath aligned with each step. I didn't need an audience. I didn't need validation. This space had always been my temple. When I finished, I sat cross-legged in the middle of the mat and closed my eyes. One phrase came into focus. When they couldn't see me, I never stopped moving. I didn't need them to name me, because I'd already earned every title. They just didn't know which language to read it in. That afternoon, I submitted for reactivation on 2 dormant contracts. One was a high-risk readiness program elite units needing real-time scenario combat trainers. The other was more classified, but it required leadership, and I was done hiding behind the word consultant. At the post office, I picked up a package addressed from Seoul. Inside a patch and handwritten note, Instructor Thorne, the South team still speaks your name in sparring. Thank you for reminding us that stillness can be dangerous. I ran my thumb over the stitched lettering. They remembered, even halfway around the world. I started prepping for the ceremony, the one Logan would be at, not for them, but because I was ready to be seen, not explained. I tailored a simple black suit, not flashy, but strong, understated like steel. The morning of, I packed one more thing, my 5th degree belt, not to wear, just to carry. A silent reminder. Then came the letter. Not an email, not a text. A physical letter, heavy paper sealed in deep green. It bore a crest I hadn't seen in years. Regional Joint Force Command. I read the first line twice. Ms. Thorne, we're reactivating your clearance to level 9 for a battalion readiness liaison role effective immediately. No salutation, no sentiment, just facts. And a signature I recognized, Brigadier Stanton. We'd crossed paths once in a very different setting. He'd watched me disarm a 6-man training team without landing a single injury. After the exercise, he said one word, precision. Now, years later, his name signed a role few ever received. It wasn't rank, but it was power, real power, and it came not from shouting, but from knowing. That night, I stood by my window and looked out across the city. Below, headlights moved like fireflies in a quiet rhythm. I didn't smile, not really, but my hand found the edge of the belt again, and for the first time in weeks, I stood taller. The reactivation orders came with one condition presence at the Regional Joint Assessment Panel. The panel was a formality for most, but for someone like me brought in from the shadows, it was more like stepping into a floodlight. I didn't hesitate. I arrived early, suited, no insignia, no fanfare. Just me and a sealed envelope marked Confidential Operation Temple Line. At the door, a guard checked my credentials. His eyes paused on the clearance code. Then he looked up at me, just slightly straighter now. "Ma'am," he said. Not out of habit, out of knowledge. I nodded once. Inside the room, everything was sharp and gray. Colonels, one general, a few civilian operatives with sharp suits and sharper silence. No one spoke as I entered, but 2 of them shifted. Recognition. I sat at the end of the table, not to wait, but because I belonged there. They reviewed my file in silence. Line after line of non-public operations. Instructor to Joint Force Readiness Units verified. Urban extraction trainer, no losses. Language specialty, Korean Tagalog Farsi. Field clearance active. Repeat, active. Then came the only question. Do you believe you're ready for integration at battalion-level tactical command? I didn't blink. I'm not here to believe. I'm here because I've done the work. Silence. Then a nod from the general. Approved. That night, I didn't tell anyone. Not Mom, not Logan, not even Kayla. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't need to be heard anymore to be sure of who I was. The next morning, I received an encrypted message from Stanton's aide. Expect joint ops presence at VFW ceremony. Standard salute protocol applies. My stomach tightened slightly. They're coming. Not because of me, but because I'd earned that kind of presence. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to walk into that room and not flinch. I unpacked the black belt again, pressed it flat inside a case, slid it into the side pocket of my jacket unseen but there. Symbolic, yes, but real. Proof I never needed permission to be what I already was. The ceremony would begin at 1400 hours. At 13:32, I parked outside, sat for a moment. No music, just breath. Then stepped out. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was aligned, like everything I'd trained for every silent room, every night on cold mats, every moment dismissed had led here. Not for applause, but for closure. As I entered the hall, Logan was already up front laughing with his squad mates. He didn't notice me. Neither did Mom. Perfect. I walked to the back, the same place I had stood before. Only this time my back was straighter, my shoulders calm, the belt case tucked neatly inside my coat. A presence without noise. At 13:59, I felt the shift. The door opened behind me. Boots entered steady, measured, heavy. A hush rippled through the rows. I didn't turn, but I heard the man at the front, a battalion commander, say 4 words. Firm, final. Stand for her, please. The air changed the second he said it. Stand for her, please. At first, no one moved. Then a shuffle, a cough, a chair scraped. One by one, men in uniform rose. Not out of politeness, not out of confusion. Out of protocol. I stayed still at the back of the room. Didn't smile, didn't flinch. Logan looked up confused. He glanced behind him, trying to see who they were rising for. Then his eyes found mine, and something in his face faltered. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. Commander Pierce, tall, sun-scorched 4 deployments under his belt, stepped forward. He walked straight past Logan, past the podium, past the crowd of seated veterans. He came to me, paused, and gave me a crisp, exact salute. No words, just his eyes, clear, sharp, locking on mine like we'd shared a battlefield once. In a way, we had. Just not one Logan ever saw. A few rows in, someone whispered, "Is that the instructor from Temple Line?" Another followed. "She's Joint Ops certified. Level 9, I think. Wait. Her. That's her. No way." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Mom looked stunned. Her eyes bounced from the commander to me, to the men still standing. She reached for Logan's arm like asking a silent question. But Logan couldn't move. He just stared, his face pale, slack-jawed, like the punchline of his joke had turned into something else entirely. The commander finally spoke. "Not to me, to the room. Some of you may not know who she is. That's all right. Some things aren't meant to be loud." He looked around. "But every man standing here knows what 5 black belts mean and what they cost to earn." A pause. "And more importantly, what kind of discipline it takes to not say anything when you've already won." Silence. No one moved. Even the flags behind the podium seemed to hang heavier. I didn't nod, didn't bow, just held his gaze for one more breath, and then turned, walked forward. Not to take the podium, I didn't need it. Just to be seen, fully. As I passed Logan, I felt the heat come off him like steam. He couldn't look me in the eye. For once, the words weren't there. Not because he was ashamed, but because deep down, he knew what he'd missed. The applause didn't come. Not because they didn't respect me, but because they didn't know if they were allowed. Respect this kind. It didn't wear a microphone. It moved like a shadow, and it changed the room without ever raising its voice. I didn't speak. Not when Commander Pierce handed me the folder stamped confidential. Not when the aide behind him nodded subtly and stepped back. I didn't explain. Didn't justify. didn't point out how many years I had swallowed silence. This wasn't a performance. It was the quiet correction of a long public error. Logan stepped down from the platform, his mouth opened then closed again. He looked around at the officers who stood at the ones who didn't dare sit, at Mom, who suddenly didn't look so sure about her front row seat. And then he looked back at me. "Sloane!" His voice cracked. It wasn't apology. Not yet. It was the sound of a man realizing he'd built his pride on the wrong story. I didn't stop walking, didn't look back, just moved forward between the rows of men who had seen enough quiet strength to recognize it when it passed. Some nodded. One, the young sergeant who'd laughed at Logan's joke earlier, dropped his gaze. He didn't laugh this time. At the side exit, I paused only once, slid my belt case from my jacket pocket, set it gently on the table beside the sign and clipboard. No speech, no note, just presence. Because if they wanted to know what 5 black belts looked like, if they wanted to see what silent discipline really meant, they had it now. Not with titles, not with medals, but with the kind of stillness that changes the air in a room. Outside, the wind had picked up. Dry leaves skittered across the pavement. A flag snapped sharply against its pole. I walked to my car unhurried, unlocked the door, paused once more, and then I heard it, from behind me. Distant but distinct. "Ma'am," a low voice, heavy with the weight of acknowledgement. I didn't turn around, didn't need to. I just nodded once. They finally saw me, not because I demanded it, but because I stood still long enough for them to catch up. It's been 3 years. 3 years since that day in the hall. Since the commander's voice broke the air like a blade. Since Logan went silent, really silent for the first time in our lives. We never talked about it, and I don't need him to. I transferred shortly after the ceremony. Quietly, no announcement, just one signature, one folder, and a plane ticket to the next rotation. I've worked with 3 units since then, none of them knew my full story. They didn't need to, they showed up on time. They followed form. They earned my trust the way I earned theirs. Wordless, through sweat precision and presence. Sometimes in small moments someone asks, "Ma'am, what's your background?" I just say I stayed the course. That's usually enough. Logan sent me a photo on my last birthday. It was of Kayla, standing in front of a local dojo, her belt white with a single yellow stripe. No caption, no emojis. But beneath the photo, I noticed a small text. She says she wants to earn it, not be handed it. I didn't reply, just smiled. A small one, the kind no one sees but feels. Mom still thinks I'll come home for Thanksgiving someday. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But I stopped waiting for a seat at their table the day I built my own command. I train in the early hours now, still stretch on cold floors, still tie my belts all 5 with steady hands. Each knot reminds me you don't need volume to make an impact. You don't need noise to be undeniable. Some people lead with speeches, others with ranks. I lead by example. And for those who can read the signs who pay attention, the message is always there. Stillness isn't weakness, it's mastery. So no, I never needed their applause. Just space and silence, and one narrow hallway to walk through without flinching. And now, I have all 3.